City Council called special session, called to order and announced a quorum is present Monday, August 28th at 5:03 p.m. First, we will do our invocation. If we all please stand and let's just have a moment of silence. Now our Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Public comments. Non-agenda item public comments, which is the white card. Comments will be taken from the audience on non-agenda related topics for a length of time not to exceed 3 minutes per person. Agenda item for public comments, which is the yellow card. Comments will be taken from the audience on non-agenda and agenda items combined for a length of time not to exceed 5 minutes total per person on all items except for public hearings. Comments on public hearing items must be made when the item comes before the council and not to exceed 2 minutes per person. No action or discussion may be taken by the city council during public comments on non-agenda items. The first one we have is Mr. Battle. Mr. Battle, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. My name's Robert Battle. If you want to learn more about what's really going on in this town, I would suggest you go to my Facebook group, Manor Community Coalition. Our city council really doesn't want to let people know what's happening. This meeting here, they call it a special session. I call it a secret session. The notice was posted on Friday for a meeting on Monday. We're talking about a lot of money being spent here. And I think this is an example of the poor planning and lack of respect that this council shows to the citizens. This is about capital expenditures of tens and tens of millions of dollars. There was no example of these in the packet that was published online. How is a person supposed to come here and talk intelligently if you don't even list what we're going to talk about? This is a recurring theme. If they do put something up on the screens here in the council, you won't see it at home because we don't have the ability to put something on the screen onto the streaming YouTube channel. This is like basic beginner stuff for AV teams. We have 3 full-time staff members. They can't do that. We have 1 camera. We have 2 cameras, but they don't want to use them. It's ridiculous. Now, there's a lot of things I would like to ask you guys. Have you figured out what the phrase historic district means yet? The question is, do you guys know what the phrase historic district means? That's something that we have. Old Manor, I pronounce it Manor, by the way, is a historic district in our code since 2017. But Scott Dunlap forgot to tell the comprehensive planners, and he forgot to tell the council. And so since you guys never read the codes, apparently, no one knew what a historic district is. There's nothing historic about 95 townhomes on top of graves by the cemetery. There's nothing historic about 400 apartments over here in West Lexington neighborhood by the Homestead. The Homestead was rediscovered. You guys have done nothing about that for 20 years plus. That's the most valuable Texas rare antiquity site in this whole town. And you guys want to put 1,500 people over there. The comprehensive plan is full of lies, and it was approved because you guys are too lazy to even proofread it. It's 605 pages. We spent $318,000 on it. And you guys are using it to destroy our town because Scott Dunlap is the guy who's been driving our town into mediocrity for 9 years.
You have 1 minute, sir.
Thank you. I'd like to be, if you guys want to put the Wallace Harvey sewer plant in for $30 million, maybe that could happen. That's another example of how much respect you don't have for our citizens. The idea that you can't even put a dog run in a park in 10 years and now you want us to give you $300 million is total insanity. I'd be curious to know also what the commission is for the bonds to the sales representative as well. I'd like you to understand there's the Martin McVeigh Cemetery has been rediscovered, and I'd like you to consider referring that to the staff to study and get a green space about 300 feet to the west of the cemetery and not stop building on top of graves. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now we'll go into our regular agenda items. Number 1, discussion on potential capital projects priorities for the proposed FY 23-24 annual budget.
Mayor, Council, we put this back on the agenda to get, I think there's some additional conversation from the council regarding where we left off at the August 16th meeting. We talked, there was some conversation going back and forth with increasing the tax rate and getting more tax notes issued for 2023. And we wanted to make sure, if we want to refer back to the tax rate information that we presented on August the 8th, where it talked about the different tax rates. And we wanted to make sure if there was any other additional priorities that the city council wanted us to pursue here before the budget is actually adopted. We wanted to get that collective response from the council rather than issuing more debt. And the key for us is that we went through the process of identifying when Lydia filled out the form that we have through the budget process. It came with a tax rate of the 0.6789, and we had that in the workshop. We talked about issuing debt, but in order to issue debt, we wanted to know which projects and priorities we wanted to pursue. And with us getting to the point of based on timelines and publication, there was some conversation that took place with the council about increasing the tax rate back up. And we tried to explain that, so we wanted to kind of go back to the sheets that we had presented before so that we can kind of get a definite, clear direction from the council. If there's any priorities that you would like to see done, we have between now and September 20th to do that. It would be my recommendation that we look at the information and then be in a position to give us direction on the tax rate. And one of the things that came up with the tax rate is that we needed 5 votes to approve the tax rate that was presented on August 16th. And with that not receiving the 5 votes, that particular item will need to be brought back to the council to make sure we get that tax rate approved. If that doesn't take place and nothing else between now and the end of September 30th, the tax rate would be adopted effective October 1st, would be 0.6763. And so again, I didn't want to get into all that without getting the sheet before you and maybe have Lydia be able to try to walk us back through how we got to the 0.6789 and then the conversation with the council of issuing tax notes. And if we're going to issue tax note, we have to make sure we know what that priority is from the city council to consider republishing the tax rate at a higher tax rate and then have the actual public hearing for it to be adopted by September 20th. And that's where I will now maybe go ahead and talk about the tax rate so we can kind of get council's input on where you want to go from here.
Gotcha. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, Council. So the sheet that I handed out is what was the proposed tax rate at the August 16th meeting. It was the 1, 2, 3, 4. It's the fourth table going from left to right as the tax rate of 0.6789. We utilize that number based off of, if you brought your book, it's on tab number 2. That's the notice of the tax rate that was published at the Travis portal. This tax rate is supported by the budget committee, which consists of Maria and Deja. And I just with us working through where our debt service was currently at, which you can see that number is $4,177,524. That's the 0.6789 is, yes, it's a decrease, but it is the most viable, workable debt service, ad valorem rate that we could have for the city. And that was without the issuance of a tax note or CO. At this point, we're past the time frame to issue COs because it does take 45 days. And so given our debt and then given our taxable valuation of the $2,101,439,419.
And I would say too, we talked about, we can, again, going forward, we talked about debt that once it's issued or new debt that will come online. We had the bigger spreadsheet that was in draft form that Mr. Chris Lane presented, is to make sure that we refer back to that is our kind of our roadmap. We want to make sure, again, we don't want to put everything out there and say where are we at right now. Is that we have something that was published, something that we had a public hearing on, and to consider something else, we want to make sure that our calendars are synced up if there's any major consideration from the council now. But like I indicated, if we use that as our guide going forward, we'll be able to know whatever dollar amount we need to issue, and then be able to come back to you with Gregory Miller and with Chris Lane to be able to give us that scenario before any new debt is issued. And any new debt issued would be a priority of the city council. So we want to make sure anything that is issued would come before the council and get in your direction. And so we want to make sure we mention that so that those that are watching that are saying they're trying to issue debt, they're trying to do things without us knowing. We want to make sure that anything that's going to get done will come back to the council, and that anything that you give us direction on will be calculated and put into how we're going to pay that debt. And we've been fortunate over the last few years to where we've had double-digit rated property increases, valuation increases. So that's been a plus for us. But again, a lot of things that have been done maybe in the past has been maybe on a conservative approach rather than being extra aggressive with our issuing of debt and making sure we don't overextend ourselves. And I think that's been critical that our bond counsel and financial advisor have been able to advise us to do that, to keep a balanced budget. And when we went into the budget balance this year, we were at a $2.1 million deficit, and we were able to make the adjustments within the budget to find the savings or make the cuts and still be able to make sure we brought your balanced budget back to approve and then be able to move forward without issuing any new debt. But if there is a desire to issue debt, we'd have to almost go back and start over a little bit just to make sure we have that complete analysis before you, so it doesn't feel like we are doing something where the public will feel you're doing things secretly, and just make sure that we can have full transparency on the debt that you would like to see issued. But based on the tax rate, based on what we know is coming down the pike, having this conversation first quarter next year or next budget cycle, we'll be able to get all those priorities. Again, there's going to be some things that will come our way, but have to make a collective decision on what we want to do. And that's where we just want to make sure we use that guide, the big spreadsheet, for the council to be able to look how the numbers change. Because trying to make conversation now about that would not allow us to be very clear without the priorities being clearly identified. And we just want to make sure we get that feedback from you on this at this point.
Can you give council some examples of some debts that can be issued?
If you were to issue, you know, like we did last year, we did $10 million worth of tax note. Part of that was for Hill Lane. Part of that was for, I think out of, let's say 4.5 million for the phase 2 of the Cottonwood plant. And so we identified certain capital projects that we knew were kind of pending. And in order to, again, last year, the tax rate was going to have a significant drop. And that's why we came back to you with those $10 million worth of projects. So that way the tax rate got to the 0.74. And as we look at our growth in the community, if we keep having double-digit growth projections, basically actual growth, it would automatically, not automatic, but it would tend to drive the tax rate down because now you have more to assess on our debt level and our operating. And so anytime you make if we were to make a change to our debt for this year or for the next proposed budget, we'd have to go back and find an additional 230,000 cuts in operation. And so that's what we were wanting to not have to. We got a balanced budget, but if we were to issue any more debt, that's going to be the impact on operations that we have to go find an additional $233,000 worth of operating cuts. Because the way that affects is the O&M number would go up. I mean, the O&M number would go down, but the INS, which is our debt rate, would have to go up to cover that additional debt. And we've been fortunate to where we have enough reserves on hand, and we've talked about maybe using some reserves to pay down, but we're not at that point to really talk about that. So that'd be more, you have that option. And the thing we've been able to do is give the council options on how to move forward with any additional projects. And that's the one thing I want to be clear about, is that we don't come back and get your direction before we have to adjust or spend down any of our reserves just to get get those numbers before you.
And tab number 4 in the booklet that was handed out to council at the workshop on the 8th does list the top section is the propositions that the voters will be voting on, and then the bottom are the priorities that were set of what projects need to occur. So if there's anything additional that we need to add to that.
So if I was making a list, which I did, of things that were important areas for me, I think for the citizens and for the council, it would be like, we need to, of course, acquire land is one thing. The other thing would be the roads, the ones that need repairs and adjustments, and the water and sewage.
Now for the streets, council may remember that there was an approval of the 1 point projects for the BCT that we submitted.
Oh yeah, 1.5 million.
It was 1.5 million of projects that council did already approve.
I did have a question. I didn't quite remember. Did any of that include Blake Manor or Carriage Hills or Bell Farms?
Blake Mater improvements are on tab 4 of the handout that was from the workshop. That is on there.
I've heard from the citizens in Carriage Hills and Bell Farms, because I live in Carriage Hills, and they're concerned about having a protected left turn there.
Mm-hmm. And that is true. Unfortunately, that road, if I'm not mistaken, does not belong to the city. So that would be a joint venture that we could possibly.
Could we work with, who would it be, Travis County?
Sure, yes.
So could we work with them?
potentially. But again, that is not that right there isn't going to impact us because that's a longer process to go and do. So that wouldn't be a project that we would go ahead and highlight to bring today.
And the ground storage for the water sewer in the regional plant?
That, if I'm not mistaken, is further down in the 25 fiscal year. Am I right? Is it 25? Is it calendar year 25 or fiscal year?
Fiscal year 25, that would be the regional plant. The 2 groundwater storage tanks have already been covered by previous, was it? Yeah, the last 10 million was the one at Greg Lane, and then the previous 10 million was the one for Greg Meaner.
Mhm.
And that one, the bid opening for that one is tomorrow. So we're moving forward with that one.
Thank you.
And it's crazy you mentioned that because that is in my PowerPoint presentation to give a status update of where the bonds were that were issued in 2022 and as well as 2021. That's included in my PowerPoint presentation for the public hearing on the 6th.
Great minds think alike.
Mhm. And I would say to kind of keep the conversation as we look forward is that come Friday, there's going to be an opportunity for the city to receive a lot of inquiries from property owners that are in the Austin's ETJ. There's that Senate Bill 2038, which will allow property owners the opportunity to pursue additional services from the city of Austin, or they can request, per the Senate bill, to be released from Austin's ETJ, which will have a significant impact on the city, and where we would have more adjacent land to our city limits that would need city services, which would require us to extend additional water and sewer services to those areas. And if that's the case, we'll bring everything back to you, what's coming, and then that way you can be able to see the bigger picture. Because right now there's some things that have been discussed, but we really don't have anything to bring forward to you. But we know after September 1st, there's going to be a lot of potential landowners, developers asking what could the city of Maynard provide us. And if that's the case, then we just have to just go through that process with the developer, bring that to you. But we won't do anything until we know exactly what their intentions are. But we have to be prepared on our side, infrastructure-wise. Can we service those areas? And you talked about sewer plant. There's going to be some opportunities to really look at the on tab 4, the Wilbarger Creek wastewater treatment expansion. That number may change, and it may change pretty significant to allow us to be able to take what could come our way. And so that's why we'll make sure once we know that's a real reality, we can come back in November, December, January, or February, whenever that time is, to say we have something that we really don't want to miss an opportunity to really look at. Because with us being so close to this potential, development, instead of going to the city of Austin, those developers say, we just want to work with the city of Maynard because your process is a lot faster. Again, we just don't want to speculate, but we just want to let you know we will come back and say, council, here's an opportunity. How would you like for us to proceed with those potential developments that would require us to spend money on infrastructure?
I know I've mentioned this before. I don't think I've asked, but I've mentioned it before. That any opportunity that we can teamwork with some of these other entities to stretch our dollars out a little bit, I hope we can be able to do that.
Yeah, and I think that's the key for us is once those developments come and they have those development agreements, it's going to be a cost share. We're not going to take the majority of that on without them saying, because it's a benefit to them coming to us. And so we'll see what that cost is, and then see how that can be to help us make a better decision rather than having them. Because some of them been at it for 6 or 7 years and got nowhere. And so now come Friday, they're going to see like they've they've got a light at the end of the tunnel option, and we'll just see where it takes us.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I have a question. What capital improvement projects are planned for downtown Manor? We know that there's a problem with the drainage in downtown Manor. There's also sidewalks.
So Mr. Jones has requested, as part of as part of his budget, he has requested a increase in contracted services, which would address the downtown. I'm trying to find it. I'm sorry. It's tab number 6, and it's PDF page number 22. Under consulting services, you'll see an increase. His original budget was $3,000 this last year. His new budget is $356,000. And there are several consulting services, most of which is the downtown projects, as well as for TERS. No, he's not here. There were other projects, and I can actually, if I'm not mistaken, in my PowerPoint presentation, I have them listed of what contracted services he's going out for.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And again, if that was a direction of the council to look at, going back to increasing the tax rate, there's going to be some program areas that would have to see a reduction to keep us in line. And that particular line item would probably be one that would see a reduction, just to try to be fair with all the departments and not just go after one. We would identify, an equal amount of cuts throughout the general fund.
Any more questions from council? Statements?
I guess the question, I'll let the council speak.
The one thing that, since we are being recorded, is that I want people to know that we are taking into consideration what the people are asking for. We also know what the direct needs of the city are, not just what the people are asking for, but what we need to actually maintain safety and stability in the city. And all of that is a lot to take into consideration. Council is not trying to steal anybody's money. Council is not trying to be overbearing with the money. But this is an awful lot for us to take into consideration, considering that we have made a lot of improvements already. And that with some of these improvements also comes jobs. Some of these improvements, it is going to be a cost, but it's also going to provide something, a little more stability in the city where people can work here. And we're trying to make it to where people can live here, work here, play here. And we may not be moving as fast as some people would like us to move. A lot of us on council have not been here for 10 years. We have not been here for the past 20 years, but we are doing our best to make sure that we are listening to the people and that we are being diligent with the funds that we are being provided. We are not trying to put the city in too much debt that we can't get out of just to make people happy. We are trying to take care of what we will be using as well, because we live here as well. When we are considering options for things that will go on in this city, it is because we live here as well. So any increase or whatever, we got to pay it too. I just wanted to make that statement.
Thank you, Councilmember Wallace.
I had another question actually for Lydia. I guess maybe because all these numbers, I had originally thought that the proposed weight was one, but then you pointed out it was another. So can we just get some clarification? What was the first proposed rate that we had on our previous council meeting?
It was 0.6789.
And you guys are suggesting to keep it 6, 7, 8, 9.
Correct.
And then on the bottom of the sheet, it has 41.22. Is that the annual?
Oh, $41.22. Yes, that is the annual increase, the average annual increase on a home value of $273,027.
So if mine's valued a little bit more than that, my tax is a little bit more than that.
Correct.
Okay.
And that that 0.6789 was the published rate that was advertised in the Maynard Journal and published on our city website and on our window. That number had never changed. Now that, of course, it is a decrease because our current tax rate is 0.7470. So that is a decrease.
I think that was equivalent to like a 10% decrease in the rate. And and some people go on averages. So when you look at the $41.22 for the year, you're talking $3.44 a month. That's what that's equivalent to for a home that averages about $275. It would be about an average of $3.44 on average.
Okay, am I correct? And you just said that it's too late to do CO bonds for the,
Yes.
when could that be done again? Next year?
We'll be able to go back out to issue COs or GOs next year. Yeah.
Okay.
We are monitoring. Chris Lane does a great job about monitoring what the current rates are. Everything's looking and pointing as if there'll be a decrease in interest rates on loans. So we'll be looking at that first quarter for sure. Well, we're monitoring it constantly, but still, our best prediction is the first quarter.
Okay, thank you.
I have another question.
Yes.
I had written down, so the O&M money that is being expended out, where does that come from? Is that all ad valorem?
Yes. What you see before you on this spreadsheet, on this sheet, is all ad valorem. That's the M&O is for our maintenance and operation, and the INS is our debt service.
And I would say another thing to keep in mind too, as we talk to our citizens about our growth and our projection, we can just remind them that a part of our sales tax is for Cap Metro. And so that way they know, I think last year was like 2.5 million is what our sales tax generated that Cap Metro keep for their services. So just as we look at growing and look at services for the community, we just want to make sure we let the citizens know that's another source that we have to work around, since it's not readily available to us. But once we continue to want different things, and the citizens want those different things, we have to make sure they understand that we have that budget to work with, which is the ad valorem. And to go above that, they would have to have a conversation with them that be engaged with how we can do more with the money that's being generated in the city of Maynard.
Council have any other questions, concerns? Legal, would we need to make a motion on this since this was just for discussion?
I think that the financial advisor needs some direction on what to include in they need direction to go seek bids from banks for the tax notes. So they need some indication of what the council is interested in funding with the tax notes in order to complete that bid process. And I'll ask financial advisor to stand up to address that.
Thank
No.
you.
Now that's if that's the desired, yeah.
Yes, this is Chris Lane, you're the city's financial advisor. I'm with Samco. Yes, the proposed rate that's in your budget and that you discussed previously at the workshops does not include a tax note. Because we're looking at doing 30 million or several bond issues like in the next 18 months. So that was the discussion that we felt like lowering the tax rate a little bit. You have a bond election coming up. You've got other things that you're going to be selling bonds for. If you've got another project that you want to do, you can put it in with whatever we're selling in the next 18 months. So if there's something, we haven't discussed that. We just talked broad numbers, and you will just set your priority when you're ready to sell bonds. But we were directed to have an item on there that if you do want to do tax notes, we're on a short time frame to get that done.
What is that time frame?
We need to go out tomorrow if you're wanting to do that and tell the banks so that we can get at least a couple of bids by your 9th or the 6th, the 6th, so we can have bids by the 6th. And a 7-year tax note there's no advertising requirement in the paper or anything like that. And we will have a 1-year call on it. So if we want to call that, and when we do new bonds, we can do that. Roll it into the, but we might not want to. It depends on the rate. So, but short-term rates are high. There's an inverted yield curve. If you know what that means is that lower interest rates are higher than longer interest rates.
So council, we can either make a motion to give direction to seek bids for tax notes
Right.
from banks, or we can I guess not to proceed or not to
Right.
move forward with that. We can do that as well. Either or, we can make a motion for either or.
And you can do either or. It's not a good idea if you really have no intention of accepting the bids, not to do it, because you don't want to ruin that relationship with the banks.
So what I'm getting is that at this time, with what we currently have, there's not a need to do the tax notes. It would not be wise for us to do that right now.
Well, you take direction from your finance director, and she talked to me about it. And since you're going to issue bonds in the next 18 months, and we did look at those cash flow for those big sheets that we talked about, if you have the growth that you've been having, you're fine. You're going to stay in that high 60s kind of tax range, plotting this out. If you have all that growth, if you don't, we might have to jump into the 70s, but you also have some reserves that can help you manage that. So it's entirely up to you. But, and we talked about this too, your tax rate is higher than the other areas around you. So this gets you closer.
would y'all like I wasn't sure if everybody had a copy of the sheet. That one's on,
Yeah,
that should be on tab.
and we used the lower tax rate on this one because you hadn't
Yeah,
approved it
it's
yet.
on tab number 4. So I wasn't sure if everyone had it.
And that one also, keep in mind, the one that's more aggressive, you can to look to the far right column. And we've got your O&M taxes going up 5% a year. And you're like at 10 million this year. And we keep having it going up continually every year. On the less aggressive one, we still have it going up by 3% a year. And we have expenses going up too.
And this is the sheet this is what I was referring to whenever we get ready to issue debt, we'll come back and try to plug this in so that way before, again, final decisions are actually taken, we can get this update and say, what would it cost us or what it would look like? And again, the timing of it around April, May, June will give us a good chance to start looking at it, sooner would give us not give us an opportunity to really get a good stance until July, August, when we get the truth in taxation and those numbers. But it'll at least give us a ballpark of what we're looking at. And based on those projected growth rates, we can be pretty close within a few percentage points, but it still allow the council to feel comfortable with, okay, we can go this direction, and then be able to prioritize based on that direction.
And I know the mayor had said, had made a comment about the keeping up with the demands of what the maintenance and operation is for the city. And that far right column is the column that has that 5% growth.
So we have your expenses, your revenue going up 5% to help cover whatever those expenses are.
Mhm.
And also remember what I keep harping on, sorry. We're trying to make water and wastewater pay for itself. It should. It's a separate business entity essentially, and it should pay for itself. So we're getting there. And I'm sorry, I have another meeting in Bastrop County. Does anybody have any questions for me before I leave?
I think we're good. Thank you, Chris.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anything else, Lydia, on this topic?
And just if there's a project that needs to be identified that, but that had not been communicated to the budget committee, or I honestly can't recall anything for myself or staff. I just want to make sure that we covered what council's desire was to complete. That's our goal.
I've already included all all the other projects that I had questions about, so I have nothing else to add.
I think we're good on our end. Thank you, Lydia.
Wait, I need.
Mayor Pro Tem Council, I'd like to make a motion that we do not issue any tax notes at this time. Or directs,
I think the question is, with the tax rate and what we had the public hearing and all that last week, is since everything was like on tab number 2, is to since it didn't have the proper votes to that we needed, is to what are our steps to bring that back so we can, is it on the 6th or the 20th, to make sure we get that rate adopted.
we'll send an email out to further explain that, but one of the council members who voted in favor of the item will need to request the item be brought back for reconsideration at the September 6th meeting. And then a vote will be taken on reconsideration of that item, which would open up the tax rate for discussion. And then I'd recommend you have give notice of another meeting to vote on that tax item and put a notice in the paper that would give notice of that meeting. And we'll give dates to staff.
So to clarify, the vote that we had prior did not pass.
It requires a 60% vote to adopt above the no new revenue rate, which would be 5 council members.
Thank you.
Okay, since no action is required for number 1, we can go to agenda item number 2. Consideration, discussion, and possible action on directing bond counsel and financial advisor to take bids on proposed tax notes to fund capital projects for FY 23-24.
Mayor, Council, Mayor Pro Tem and Council, I'd like to make a motion that we direct staff not to issue any tax notes at this time.
Motion was made by Councilmember Wallace. Do I have a second?
I second.
Second by Councilmember Amasqua. Have any questions on the motion? No questions? Let's vote.
All in favor?
All opposed? Unanimous decision, all in favor.
Do we need to make a motion to bring the
You don't,
item back?
No.
no, that'll be a different process. Thank you for asking.
We can move to item 3.
Agenda item 3, discussion on the legislative update.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, Veronica Rivera, Assistant City Attorney. I've been asked to provide you an update unless y'all would like to discuss. Well, we are going to provide you our summary that we usually place, that we always submit to our municipalities after the legislative session. It'll be 2 parts. The first one will cover the 88th Texas Legislature regular session, and I apologize, I'm going to be winded. I've been out with throat issues. And the second one will be the second special session, because if you recall, the first special session, nothing got done. But the second session, there was discussions on property tax relief. So that will come at a later date. So the concentration right now will be on the 88th Texas Legislature regular session. What you have in front of you is just a partial list of bills. Before I go through those are the ones that deal with land use. There were quite a bit of bills dealing with land use, but I wanted to cover some just briefly overall what happened with the regular session and legislative session. There were over 8,300 bills that were filed during this legislative session, and out of those, over 1,200 bills were passed. That's from the previous legislative session. Over 1,000 bills passed, so definitely there was an increase. And from the bills that were passed in the 88th Texas Legislature, over 200 bills that passed were city related. So cities again were under the microscope on limiting their powers, and the items that were discussed were some that were okay, were substantial investment in water infrastructure and improving broadband access across the state. So you'll be hearing more about broadband as those rules and regulations start coming down from state agencies. But there was also an attack on cities again and their authority regarding land use, especially with regard to disannexation, ETJ. And the first bill that I wanted to talk to you about was that preemption bill, which y'all have or have not heard of. It's HB 2127, which again limits or eliminates the cities from regulating specific issues and items. So what were those limits? What are we talking about that's being regulated or that cities can no longer regulate? We're talking about employment leave, hiring practices, breaks, employment benefits, scheduling practices, and other terms of employment that exceed or conflict with federal or state law, regulations involving the breeding, care, treatment, or sale of animals or animal products, if persons hold a license for the business issued by federal or state government. All of these items right now are addressed by state statute, and that's where it would stop. Cities would no longer be able to regulate. And specifically, or more specifically, unless expressly authorized, city ordinances are void and unenforceable if they include anything dealing with the agriculture code, and these are Texas statutes, business and commerce code, finance code, insurance code, labor code, natural resource code, occupations code, and property code. And I go slowly on these because those are a lot of codes. These are a lot of state statutes that cities are now being prevented from actually regulating through city ordinances. HB 2127 is effective September 1st, and there is a 3-month notice prior to anyone filing a suit on an ordinance that the city may have that is no longer authorized because one of these codes is covered, so that the city can have the ability to review and repeal or amend before the suit. This bill, as you may gather, will definitely be challenged. I hope the city of Manor is not the first one to challenge it, but it will be challenged, and it's broad because it's so broad, and the extent of the city preemption, we really will not fully know this for several years as the courts determine and define what field preemption means. So that's the first one I think everybody has been starting with when they do presentations, because this is really tying cities' hands, municipal hands. So what you have in front of you now is the partial summary that we provided on land use and planning. And the first one that I just wanted to bring your attention to is on the first page, HB 14. This one takes effect on September 1st of 2023. And actually, before I continued, I just wanted to see if you all had any questions on the preemption bill and how much. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. This one was the one that had the most meat on it, but I'm really just going to highlight some of our recommended actions. But please let me know if you have any questions. So HB 14 deals with allowing for third-party inspections and review of development applications. So our recommendation for this bill is that you determine whether the city wishes to employ a third-party inspector and ensure that the contract includes deadlines for performing reviews, and we may need to update ordinances as needed. There is no deadline for this. This legislation is just taking effect on September 1st. The other item that I wanted to highlight is on the next page. Excuse me. HB 586 deals with the annexation of roadways. And again, the recommended action, and this took effect immediately. So the recommended action on this one is for us to update annexation procedures for annexation of the roadways, and also an understanding that the ETJ is no longer expanding. If you recall, previously in previous legislative sessions, annexation authority was really taken away from cities, and now it's just voluntary annexation. So there's no silver lining in this legislation. It's not expanding the ETJ at all. On the next page, HB 1381, wanted to highlight, this is zoning hearing procedural requirements for Planning Commission. This bill clarifies that only one public hearing on a preliminary report on the zoning recommendation is required before submitting the final report to City Council. So again, our recommendation is to update the zoning ordinance if needed and desired. This is taking effect September 1st, and again, there is no deadline for action. Another item that, because we do have charter schools within the city, wanted to highlight is HB 1707. It's the regulation of open enrollment charter schools. This is where charter schools would be allowed to be treated almost like public schools. And again, the recommended action is update your ordinances as applicable or as desired. The effective date of this bill is September 1st, 2023. And action, any deadlines would be after September 1st. Next item is HB 1750. And this imposes certain requirements the city must meet to regulate certain agricultural operations, and imposes some limitations on city regulation of certain agricultural operations. Again, recommended action is to review existing and future ordinances for compliance. If existing ordinance regulate the agricultural operations under HB 1750, then determine if the city wishes to continue the regulations and so follow the required procedure to adopt them. This has an effective date of September 1st as well. And again, any action that you would like to take would apply after September 1st to existing and future ordinances. HB 2371, which is on your next page that I wanted to highlight. This one deals with cemeteries and circumstances for making additional burial spaces available. Again, our recommended action is to update city ordinances, policies to implement this statute if desired. And the effective date is September 1st, and no deadlines are provided. The next one that I definitely wanted to highlight is on the next page, and you've heard of this one before. It's a continuation, the continuation saga, and this is HB 3699. They're calling it amendments to the platting shot clock regulations. So I'm sure y'all remember the shot clock, which pretty much was a rewrite of your subdivision ordinance the last time around. So this one, the recommended action is to update the subdivision regulations and the process and forms. There are some additional items that are highlighted in green below, and you can tell this one's rather lengthy. There's a reason for that. But we also need to determine whether the plat or plan approvals will be delegated to staff. So the effective date for this is September 1st. And deadlines, again, it's after September and after ordinance amendments. If you look at the deadlines, by January 1st of 2024, we need to adopt and make available to the public the written documents and information required for this to be submitted with an application. And also 3699, HB 3699 would apply to applications submitted after September 1st. The next one that I wanted to highlight for you is SB 543. It's addressing conveyance of real property for economic development purposes and establishing procedures for conveyance. So again, the city has been working on economic development, and so I just wanted to highlight this for y'all. The effective date was immediate, and this would be a useful tool when y'all are discussing Chapter 380 agreements that Mr. Scott Jones may be bringing forward to you, and how to establish procedures for conveyance. And there are no deadlines for this. I'm sorry, I didn't realize we didn't have page numbers on here. SB 929, the next page over. This addresses required notice for zoning changes that create non-conforming use and requiring compensation. Again, our recommended action is to establish the process to determine when this law is applicable to a zoning amendment, and then update procedures and notices accordingly. So this is dealing with zoning. Excuse me. And next item, it's at the bottom of that page, and it was already brought up by your city manager, and that's SB 2038. Which allows landowners to petition for release from the city's ETJs and establishing exceptions and procedures. This takes effect September 1st. And again, there may be petitions that are submitted to the city of Austin, but City of Manor should also be prepared for the possibility that petitions may be submitted to the City of Manor. So this one, again, in particular, is one that we wanted to highlight. There really is no action that is required. It's, you know, even though we're calling it informational, it's pretty significant. So that's why we're highlighting that and letting you know that this will now be in effect as of September 1. Next item is on the next page, SB 2440. And this is certification of groundwater supply required for certain plats. And this actually doesn't take effect until January 1st of 2024. And we would need to, the recommended action is to update the subdivision ordinance and application list to incorporate this requirement. And I know we've been talking about this a lot in other work sessions. I also wanted to highlight the next bill that's right after this one. It's HB 2071. And this one deals with public facilities corporations exemptions. So this is the relief that many municipalities were asking for that has been provided. It took effect immediately. There are no deadlines, but again, this deals with what a PFC sponsor may or may not do within a municipality. The next bill is HB 1922 on the next page, and this is the reauthorization of building permit fees. So this is something Lydia might and Scott might be interested in. And the recommendation for this one is to determine when fees need to be reauthorized, establish and track a schedule for doing so, and consider making it a part of the annual budget process. And again, this will not take effect until January 1st of 2024, so it would be something that you may want to look into for the next budget cycle. And sticking with fees, if you look at the next page, HB 3492, this one's a doozy. Value-based fees are prohibited. So just to give you a little bit of background on this, after our recommended action is to update the fee schedule to comply with the section as part of the 2023-2024 budget process. So it's on right now. It takes effect September 1st of 2023. There are planners across the state that are working on how you would actually calculate this fee, because it can no longer be based on the value of a piece of property for your fees, which again are still necessary because you have review costs. But this one it takes some thinking of, and again, we would need to update this fee schedule and possibly even update one of your ordinances. So just wanted to highlight that one. And the one right below it, I just wanted to highlight HB 3727 and SB 1420, where it talks about hotel occupancy tax. The reason I wanted to highlight this one was because it has an immediate effective date, but if you look at the summary, it amends the definition of convention center facilities to include parking facilities. So I just wanted to highlight that for you, since we are the city's possibly looking at a convention center or hotels or anything dealing with hotel occupancy tax. Then on the next page, we've already discussed, but here it is in detail, HB 2127, that's the preemption law. And we do provide the recommended action is to discuss with executive staff and council options related to this law. But again, we're going to be monitoring case law on this to see how it develops. So that's what you have under land use and planning. I did want to highlight some other items that are not in that, because that, again, that was a partial summary for us, from us, and we're still working on the rest of it. Right now it's up to 78 pages and we expect it to be a little bit longer. The sections that I really wanted to address were the election sections. And just address for you HB 2626, which takes effect September 1st. This is requirement to post political contribution and expenditure reports on the city website. So our recommendation for that is to prepare a location on the web page for posting campaign reports and update administrative processes, to include the step of redacting address information and posting the political contribution and expenditure report on the city's website. The other item under elections that I wanted to highlight, and this is for candidates, it's HB 3372. It deals with political campaign reporting requirements for reporting contributions made by credit card. And again, this is informational for candidates, but we recommend that to update candidate materials if candidate materials are provided to address this topic. Another item that this one's interesting is under elections is HB 5180. And this is a requirement for making available for public inspection voted ballots after the election is canvassed. And the recommended action there is to determine if the county maintains images of voted ballots and then make a plan for compliance. Next item under elections is SB 477. Excuse me. Requirements for accommodating disabled voters at polling locations and with online applications for early voting ballots. Our recommendation there is to plan for accommodating disabled voters at polling places as required, obtain required signage, prepare website to allow application for early voting ballots to be filled out online. This takes the effective date is immediate, and it does apply to the November 2023 and subsequent elections. Another item under elections for candidates is SB 825. It's the political campaign reporting which are requirements for reporting contributions made by credit. Oh, did I just repeat that? Oh, it was because it was SB. So that was the SB 825 and HB 3372 are companions. So that was dealing with with candidates. The next item under elections is SB 1052, which limits the compensation on election judges. This takes effect September 1st, and our recommendation is to adjust election judge and election clerk schedules as needed to comply with this bill. And then SB 1661 is a requirement, the requirements for central counting stations. It takes effect September 1st. Ensure scan systems meet the requirements of the statute if the city runs its own elections. At this time, I believe it's the county that's running the city's elections, but this one definitely should be highlighted if the city ever runs its own elections. Okay. I have some other minor ones if you'd like me to continue, or if you have any questions. Okay, so under finance and administration, one of the ones that we wanted to highlight, and this is for IT, the local government security incidents. It's SB 271, dealing with local government security incidents. And this takes effect September 1, and it's really informational, but again, our recommendation is to make sure IT provider department is aware and establishes a procedure for compliance under SB 271. Then we have under finances, appraiser indemnity, that's SB 1766. And this is more for legal and administration. This takes effect September 1, and we just need to confirm future contracts comply with this provision, particularly if city form contracts are being used, and update forms accordingly. Under administration, I still need to highlight this. I'm sorry. SB 1893 is the TikTok ban bill. So I laugh, but at the same time, it's serious. Our recommendation is that city prepare and adopt a policy, or prohibit by, or it'd be prohibited by city manager administrator direction pending adoption of the policy. This took effect immediately, and action would need to be immediate. So, let's see. There are subject to certain exceptions for law enforcement or information security purposes. Thank you. Okay, and under purchasing and contracting, we're continuing. This is HB 679, soliciting and awarding construction contracts. For this, again, same thing. It would be a recommended action between legal and administration, and this is to review the RFQs and the RFPs for compliance regarding this this bill's provision. This is the next one. City Secretary may be aware of this already, is HB 1817, and this deals with the 1295 contract disclosure. And recommended action again is to confirm the process for obtaining 1295 disclosures to see for applicability. Under contracts, there is HB 2518. This is the lease agreements. or it deals with lease agreements, and our recommendation is to ensure lease agreements comply with the statute. This took effect or is taking effect September 1, 2023, and it deals with specific lease terms that are now required.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that number? Annette?
HB 2518, dealing with lease agreements. And then HB 2965, we're still under contracts. This deals with construction liability waiver, and it's taking effect September 1st. And although this is informational, it's the same thing as we need to look at the construction contracts and update as necessary. This would also involve city engineering on looking at their contracts. Don't have any, we have more bills, but I don't have any that are highlighted that I wanted to look at real quick. There is one. Under public safety, we have some other bills that I didn't not highlight, but I did want to bring up one that we've dealt with before that is now prohibiting this, and that is HB 1819. City has a juvenile curfew, and HB 1819 now prohibits local juvenile curfews. So I wanted to highlight that one under public safety. Let's see. Under public safety, I also wanted to highlight HB 4759, and this makes dangerous dog complaints information confidential. So I know that we've discussed dog complaints before. So under utilities, again, the main thing that I just wanted to highlight was the fact that broadband was one of the major items that was discussed, other than, of course, electricity, but that one doesn't really apply right now for cities. But the broadband infrastructure fund was created under HB 9. And SB 1238 provides for infrastructure fund eligibility. And then SB 2119 is creating a statewide broadband service maps. Again, I just wanted to give you some highlights because this is still a work in progress on how, on if and when cities will receive any type of grant from the state for broadband capabilities. And that is pretty much all I have, unless y'all have some questions and any other bills that y'all would like me to highlight.
Thank you, Veronica. I think that's having this update, even as we continue to go through our FY 23-24 budget, will allow us to be able to see if there's anything we need to account for in next year's budget once it becomes effective in October 1st. So I think the fees maybe need to be adjusted, but I think anything related to what's coming down, we just have to make the adjustment through our ordinances or resolutions so that we can be in compliance with the new legislative items that were approved this session.
Also, I wanted to point out that TML's website, it's a really good reference to go. They're constantly updating their legislative updates, and you can go and view each one.
I think during that next meeting, they're probably going to go over those same updates when we have our Region 10 meeting as well.
Yes, TML Region 10 meeting September 14 in Lockhart.
Don't forget.
I have a question. I have a question, maybe a comment, but it's just asking that I think it's the first question that you asked, which was basically who would be the one to help make these recommendations or go through our ordinances and make sure they're updated on time. Is that a city thing?
Yes, we would actually work with, and are starting to work with city staff. We always do that after each legislative session, especially when September 1 comes along and you'll start seeing some items. Again, a lot of them don't have deadlines. So, as for example, with zoning ordinance, you have it come to you about twice a year. So that's when we would make some of those recommendations. But there's nothing to keep us from bringing it back to you earlier, depending on, again, what the administration would like to do. And the same thing for the subdivision ordinance. I'm sure that one's going to be coming sooner rather than later because it's dealing with the shot clock amendments.
Can I ask 2 questions about these?
Yes.
I was just looking at it really quickly, but the one that was like the SB 2038 with the landowners petition for release, some of the
ETJ.
options were having to go to election or having to have so many votes in order to have petition. Just to make sure that I was reading it right, those are options, not in addition to. Like the way that it was written, some of them were semicolons. So I didn't know if that was an in addition to or if that's an option as a.
So, unfortunately, this is going to be petition driven and what the property owners would like to do. And that would be what would come to the city to determine what the options would be once we get the petition, because this is definitely new territory, which I didn't mention, but I also believe that it's going to be a challenge for anyone that wants to withdraw from a municipality's ETJ, and your city manager just addressed what those concerns are going to be, which is, where are you going to get water? Where are you going to get wastewater? If you think that you're wanting to withdraw because there's too many regulations affecting your property, you're still going to have to comply with county regulations. And then again, if you were wanting to get water from, say, a well, then you're dealing with state regulations. And so some of these things are costly if you're doing it individually instead of remaining within a municipality's ETJ. So infrastructure is going to be an issue, talking about streets, and then public safety is also going to be an issue, because now you're talking about the county sheriff's department taking over, when I think the chief can talk more about the fact that there's agreements. We have ILAs where the cities, help out the sheriff's department, but if there's no ILA, you're no longer within. ETJs are tough enough to monitor through public safety, and now if you've withdrawn, that's going to be another concern and another cost.
My only other one
Yes, ma'am.
was HB 1922, which was the reauthorization of building permit fees. Is
Mhm.
that both commercial and residential?
That I need to check. Do you know? Your director is saying yes.
Were there any other questions or discussion before we adjourn? This concludes City Council called special session. The time is 6:29 p.m.